This is S.S. Wilson, back with another installment. And this is a view of perfection you never actually see in the movie. It's looking from the south of town. The green trailer on the right is Melvin's house. And over on the other side of the street is Val and Earl's trailer. And behind the last house in town is where we hid some of the bathrooms for the crew. Now, I imagine when most people hear about Tremors, the lost tapes, they're really hoping to see something like this. So the next two sequences are all about the first time we used the full-sized 8-foot Graboid puppet. Now, this is not the first time a Graboid appears in the movie, but it is the first time that we shot it, because remember, movies are not shot in sequence. This is for the sequence where it bursts up outside of Chang's market. And because this was the first time, we were a little bit worried about it. How was it going to work to get this big, heavy thing pushed up out of the ground? So we had built into the schedule time for the crew to test various ideas for making this work. Here I am talking to some of them. I have no idea what I'm trying to indicate with my strange hand gesture. Anyway, in preparation, two big pits had been dug next to Chang's market, and the pits themselves actually gave us something to worry about because of where we were shooting out in the Mojave Desert. All kinds of creepy things crawl around out there, and we began to worry about what might crawl into the pits overnight. When my dad got there on this day and started shooting, here was his comment.
And there are no rattlesnakes in the pits.
Yes, we were worried about rattlesnakes, and we had a full-time snake wrangler on set to check for them every time we used the pits. Well, happily today, the pits were snake-free, and the testing continued. Here's one of the first looks at the custom-built Graboid elevator. Another concern we had was hiding the elevator itself from the camera, so the team added a metal tube that went all the way around the pit, drilled with a bunch of holes so they could pump dust through it. Now, an important part of the test, of course, was to get the creature effects people and the mechanical effects people working together. And very soon, they discovered an anomaly.
How tall is this? I think it's just under 8 feet, and this is 7'3". 7'9".
Yes, the Graboid pit was 3 inches shorter than the Graboid was tall, so this was something they were going to have to deal with. The fella in the green sweater there, by the way, is Tom Woodruff. He and his partner Alec Gillis had just started their new creature design business, which they called Amalgamated Dynamics. I'm proud to say that Tremors was their very first movie as a company. Of course, they would go on to build many more monsters for many more movies and win quite a few Academy Awards. So the work continued. Here you can hear that it's air pressure that actually moves the Graboid elevator. The head of mechanical effects had made the decision that air pressure would be faster and easier than, say, hydraulics. Here's the air hoses going way back behind Nestor's trailer where the compressor was hidden. And here they are testing the elevator with Tom and an effects guy standing in for the weight of the Graboid. And while all this was going on, Dad went over and got an interesting shot of what a Graboid looks like to Tom when he's inside of it. There are the handles that he grabs to move the beak. But if you want to see a lot more about how Graboids were built, be sure to go to the Amalgamated Dynamics YouTube page. It's called Studio ADI YouTube. There's lots of great videos there. Well, finally, it was time to put the Graboid onto the Graboid elevator. And what they next found out is that he was a little bit of a tight fit. Eventually, he made his first trip down inside the elevator, and they could move on to the next issue. they'd always known we'd need some kind of lid over the pit. You couldn't just fill it with dirt. That would weigh tons. It would crush the Graboid. It would crush Tom inside the Graboid. So here's the first version of a lid that they tried, just a piece of styrofoam. And you'll notice that they had to cut a hole in it because remember the pit is too short for the Graboid. Now, there was a lot of experimentation here because, as far as I know, this is the first time anybody had pushed a 300-pound puppet plus puppeteer up out of the ground. They were worried about a lot of things, like how would the lid break, or would it break? What if it came up like a donut on the end of the creature's beak?
This is where the plywood ring would have been the hot ticket.
So they began discussing things like using a plywood ring to hold the edges of the styrofoam down. Now, I have to say, these discussions went on for hours, and eventually my dad got bored and literally walked away and started shooting other things.
And time out for little emerging desert beauty. Springtime in the desert.
But he did come back to catch them in the next phase of their test. By now, Tom Woodruff was inside the Graboid, maybe for the first time on set.
We're going to drop you down, gang.
Not everything was going smoothly. The wind came up and they learned just how fragile their lid was. But they kept pushing forward because they wanted to test the material they were going to use to cover the lid. You can think of it as fake dirt. It's called vermiculite, and it's actually a potting soil. It's just the right color and very lightweight and much easier to work with than real dirt. Believe me, we used truckloads of it on the movie. So here they are getting ready to spread vermiculite on their somewhat damaged lid for the first time.
The wind blew it up and cracked it in half. Just about 2 seconds.
So the vermiculite went on and part of the lid collapsed immediately. They moved in and tried to save the rest of it, but the whole thing fell into the pit. So with the Graboid half covered in vermiculite, he had to come back out, and then Tom had to come back out of the Graboid, and they had to rethink things. Now this all looks a little chaotic, but this is why we were testing. We wanted to catch as many of these problems as possible before the camera and the cast arrived. On this day they actually called it quits and closed the Graboid back up. They may have done more testing, but if they did, Dad didn't shoot it. But the good news is he was there when main unit rolled into perfection and got ready to shoot the shot for real. But I'm getting tired, and that'll be the subject of my next video.
Action!
Action.